If you've ever had the experience of watching yourself on screen after a project is produced, it can cause all the feels. Let's unpack what you can and can't deduce from watching your final footage on screen. Everyone, I'm Matthew Cornwell with Get Taped here in Atlanta, Georgia, one of Atlanta's original audition taping services, which I co-own with my amazingly talented, beautiful wife and best friend, Brooke. Okay, so this topic was swirling in my head after the airing of my episode of Will Trent on ABC or Hulu, depending on where you get your network shows. It was a guest star role with 2 scenes, and I had so much fun on set with that cast and crew. I felt trusted and supported. I even inspired the director to do a couple extra setups based on some comedic physicality that I was doing on set for one of the scenes. And with guest star roles in low supply here in the Southeast, a topic for another day, you can bet I was itching to see how my footage turned out. Side note, production goofed and accidentally credited me as co-star in the end credits. If that ever happens to you, just contact your local SAG office to get it straightened out. Anywho, when the episode came out, just like I said in the intro, I had all the feels. I was very happy overall, but I was a little sad that a couple of my lines didn't make it, and some fun improv that was the result of those extra setups that I mentioned was cut. Stick around to the end of this video and I'll show you a portion of my footage from Will Trent. And if you've had even one credit in this biz, whether it's a low budget indie or a full budget Hollywood production, you've experienced one or more of the following. Lines get cut, an entire scene gets cut, your entire role gets cut. All your lines are intact, but you don't get a lot of coverage in the final edit. And no matter what it looks like, it just seems to blow by so fast when you're watching it, doesn't it? So let's talk about this, specifically those first 3 instances where a line gets cut, or lines, an entire scene gets cut, or your entire role gets cut. Now, if you look at those first 3 things through a neutral lens, not assuming the worst, what you'll come to find out over time with experience, especially if you get to spend any time in an editing room editing your own projects, you'll realize that your lines, your scenes, or your entire role getting cut almost always has to do with time restrictions, runtime of the whole episode if it's for network TV, just overall pacing, therefore things need to be cut, or a myriad of other reasons that have nothing to do with you or the quality of your performance. So for Will Trent, which airs on a network, ABC, they have roughly 42 minutes of finished, completed airtime in an hour-long show. The rest of it goes to commercials. So unlike a streaming show that originates on Hulu or Netflix, they can't keep everything in. In fact, they will always shoot more than 42 minutes so that they can edit it down to that perfect length for the final airing. Why? Well, okay, let's do a thought exercise. They write an episode that is only 42 pages because they're assuming that the old adage holds true, that a page of dialogue equals a minute of finished film. So they're hoping that that's true. Well, what happens when they get into the editing room and some of those scenes paced faster than they expected, and the total runtime is only 40 minutes. Uh-oh. Or even worse, one of the scenes just isn't working, and so the final runtime after cutting that scene is now down to 38 or 37 minutes. What do you do? I mean, no one wants extra commercials, right? So they will always overshoot so that it gives them breathing room, and they just know they're going to have to cut things to bring it down to the final runtime. And sorry, as a co-star or even a guest star, you're likely going to be the first person on the chopping block, whether it's your entire role or even just a scene or a line. And even outside of the network arena, take it from someone who has edited tons of my own projects. I've had to cut lines, scenes, characters before. Sometimes it just doesn't work in the final edit. You have to cut a line here or there, or an entire scene. I mean, it's kind of weird if I think about it, because if I've written my own project for me to act in, and then I perform those lines exactly as I had imagined, why is it that when I get in the editing room that I would need to cut anything? And yet I constantly find myself doing that very thing. And it's not that I'm suffering from a high degree of self-loathing, I hope. So it's really nothing personal. Now, let me get real here for a second. Sometimes the reason things are cut or the reason your footage is minimized can be because of performance issues. Perhaps you're just not up to the standards of the rest of the actors on set. Perhaps you just have a funny way about you and it doesn't fit the tone of the scene or the show. in rare cases, you're actually too good for that lead. So they have to minimize your coverage. All of that can happen. And there's no point in dwelling on it, because unless you have direct feedback from someone on set, then don't go down those rabbit holes. There's no point, because you'll never know the actual reason. And we're really good as humans at defaulting to the most negative scenario. Just don't do it. Stop thinking about it. And I've kind of bled into that fourth item that I referenced earlier, which is that your lines are intact, but your coverage is lacking. The camera just doesn't cut to you very often in that final edit. It stays on the other character or characters in the scene. Now, if you're acting opposite number one on the call sheet, there are very obvious reasons for this. It can just be a purely business decision. They're the ones selling tickets, so to speak, or getting eyeballs on the show. So they need to highlight that person. Similarly, it could just be that we need to see the star's reactions to your lines. Because let's just say that you're a doctor talking to the lead character about a diagnosis. Well, no offense, but the audience doesn't care about the diagnosis in terms of what your face is showing us. They only care about how that lead actor is reacting. And from an editing standpoint, of course, I have to establish that there's a doctor in the room. So I'm going to cut to you in the wide shot, and maybe even in some of your lines of dialogue, there might be a medium shot or a close-up if it's like a dun dun dun. But largely, I just want to see the lead's reactions to your lines. So your cuts, the moments that I'm cutting to you as that co-star doctor with a few lines, it's really just to break up the footage of the lead. It allows me to use different takes of their footage and craft the final performance the way I want. So in that respect, you're just a utility character. You're just there as a way to break up that footage, to give the audience a little bit of a reference point that there is someone else in the room. But the audience, I'm sorry to say it, doesn't really care about your character. Can you see the point that I'm trying to make here? Yes, you can be disappointed that they cut some or all of your stuff, or that you're off screen too much, or that in the end, you're not going to be able to use any of this for your demo reel. But if you back up and look at this from a business perspective, it has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with the needs of the project as a whole. So do not, I repeat, do not infer that you did a bad job because your entire role was cut, because lines were cut, because the camera is on the other actor way more than it's on you. You just can't come to that conclusion unless you have more information. Now, I could end there, but let's flip the script and talk about what you can infer from watching that final footage. Let's say you're in a scene with two of the leads and the dialogue is spread pretty evenly amongst the three of you. Well, mathematically, if you got 33% of the coverage in the final edit, that would seem equitable. Based on what we've been talking about up to this point, you won't get that, right? You might get 20% or 10%, and sometimes they just find a way to cut you out and you get 0%. So if you do get 33%, if you get that fair, equitable amount of coverage, that's a huge win. But if you get more than your fair share, that is an amazing compliment. Because think about it, the editor who made those initial choices, they don't know you, so they have no incentive to highlight a co-star or a guest star. Not when they got two leads that they need to highlight like they do every other scene in every other episode. So by lingering on you, they're telling you something. They're saying that, wow, you brought it. You brought value. You made this scene better by what you did in that performance. Furthermore, the director agreed because they sat in on that editing session and said, yeah, I like that. I approve this cut. Now, it might be flipped, and it might be that the director fought for your coverage because the editor was defaulting to the normal way of doing things of focusing on the leads, and the director came in and said, no, let's focus on this person a little bit more. Regardless of how that went, though, it had to be approved by the studio and the network. So all these people agreed that we should focus on you more than normal. So with that type of scenario, you can infer that you did an above average job. You brought it. You showed up, you delivered, and you elevated the material in such a way that they wanted to highlight that in the final edit. So to sum up, if your footage is great, then be thankful and write it in your gratitude journal tonight. But if it's disappointing in any way, do not take it personally. Okay, as promised, here is a clip from my episode of Will Trent, episode 316.
Hey, it's your friendly neighborhood insurance agent.
You guys are on the Webster case, right?
Not now, Tim.
The family are my clients.
No, don't.
Believe me, I don't want to be here either. It wrecks me to know when a client is hurting.
Anyway, you guys rent or own? Because I got some new rates that'll blow your wigs
Look,
off.
you're busy, we're busy. Spit it out.
I promise to help the Websters heal, and that starts with giving them closure. Then doing my own little investigation.
And you can see more of that footage by clicking on my demo reel here. That's it for now. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on set. And hopefully in the final edit.